Hello, Screen Demons, and welcome to the Screens from the Basement podcast with Sam and Casey. I am one of your creepy co-hosts. I am Casey.
I'm Sam the Damned, and let's get screaming.
Let's get screaming as on this episode we welcome back author Joshua Millican, author of Deeper Than Hell, Septum. Hey, 2 years ago we talked about teleportasm, and now we are back to welcome Josh to talk about Dopefoot, coming out June 16th.
Dopefoot
hey guys,
is the
it's
tale.
so good to be back. I've always remembered you, and our talk from teleportasm was one of my favorites. So being back to talk about Dopefoot is awesome.
Hell yeah, man! Like we're pumped. Casey and I we've been texting as we've been reading this book, and you know, much like teleportasm, I just had no idea what was gonna happen chapter to chapter in this thing. It's incredible how you
Thank
do
you.
this. Dopefoot. It's about a college dropout. He accepts a job at a cannabis farm, and he gets thrown a whole bunch of shit, gang wars, possible yetis wandering around. You never know. So Josh, how did this book come to be? How did you gain the little spark that turned into Dopefoot?
Yeah, well, first of all, I gotta say I've always been a fan of Bigfoot. I'm from California. I've been in Southern California and Northern California, so Bigfoot's kind of like the state cryptid, and he's like the most famous of them all. So Bigfoot's a source of pride. I only grudgingly stopped believing in Bigfoot, the deeper you look, the more you're put in this position of either believing in the fantastic or coming to grips with reality. But anyway, we'll get into that stuff later. I'm spending a lot of time in Northern California this year, and I came up here about a year and a half ago, and I just something about the scenery really just inspired me to jump into a Bigfoot novel story. I thought it would be, for lack of a better term, I thought it would be easy because Bigfoot horror is very niche, and it has pretty well defined parameters. It's really hard to break the mold, so I thought it would be fun just going in and playing with these old tropes. And it was only as I started that I realized it was becoming really important to me to not give people what they've had before, to give them the cryptid experience, but I wanted to turn a lot of these tropes on their heads. And yeah, like you were saying, Sam, I kind of wanted to throw you off more than just once throughout this, give you kind of like trick you into thinking it's all going this way. You think you know what kind of story this is, but actually it's different. And hopefully that'll happen at least a couple times.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Me and Sam were reading it about the same time, about the same pace, and every time we thought you would zig, you zagged, and I was like, where is this going? I'm loving this. So I loved that approach, and
Thank you.
it's the term Dopefoot right away is something I've never heard of before, and you explain it in the book what that means. But for our audience, what does that term actually mean, and how does it relate to the story you're telling here with
Sure.
Bigfoot involved?
Absolutely. Well, it's all kind of cosmic in a lot of ways, because I made up the term Dopefoot. And I had the title before I even really knew what it meant. And my wife actually came up with it. I was like thinking about a Bigfoot book, and I was thinking about some really great Bigfoot book titles, and kind of like bummed that I couldn't think of the perfect one. And she's like, "You're gonna call your book Dopefoot?" And I was like, "Yes, I am." And the thing is, when you say Dopefoot, you've already got the elevator pitch. It's Bigfoot on a cannabis farm, right? I mean, it's all there in the title. And it's not a real life word. I mean, now it is. I created it, and that's kind of like teleportasm.
So that's crazy. I'm going to pause you for a second. You kind of blew my mind right now. That I thought that was just a California term I had never heard of, because when you explain what it is in the book, it's like, yeah, that makes 100% sense. So
Right.
The fact that you and your wife made that up literally is blowing my mind. That's so cool.
But yeah, even though we made it up, it's like I didn't even really know what it meant, as I was writing. It's like, who is Dopefoot or what is Dopefoot? But part of what I love about it is, that, we created this new word, just like with teleportasm, which, has a definition, but it's a made up word as well. So, I mean, I don't know if all of my books from here on out are going to be these made up concepts, or that'll have you wondering if it's real or not. But there's something just so awesome about creating a term, because when you Google teleportasm, there's only one thing that's going to come up, and Dopefoot's already on the top of the list when you Google it. So I enjoy adding to the zeitgeist.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. And I love your foreword that you write in the book where you're talking about like as a child you went Bigfoot hunting with your dad. Like I
Yeah.
just thought that was a really cool way to open it. Is there any like any cool stories from like your childhood Bigfoot hunting um that kind of just stuck with you, or
I,
is
I
it just
wish
more
I
the
wish I had
experience?
something really exciting, but the I never saw anything that looked like Bigfoot. Went camping a few times in Northern California, way up there, Forks of Salmon, with my dad when I was a kid, and he told me, yeah, this is Bigfoot country. So I just remember always being on the lookout. Especially once it got dark. I was always looking for something in the trees. And again, this is the beginning of my love for Bigfoot, because I he was my hometown hero. And, I grew up, I'm Gen X, so I saw this series. It's like an early unsolved mysteries type thing called In Search of, and the host was Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
And there was a whole In Search of episode about Bigfoot where they showed the Patterson Gimlin film, and it was like Spock from Star Trek telling me this. I didn't know that it was like up for debate. I was like, okay, Bigfoot is real because I just saw it on video, and Spock from the Enterprise just told me it's true, so it must be true. And I carried that for a long, long time. Like I said, I only grudgingly kind of came around to the fact that it, like, okay, let's get really, really real. But at the same time, as I hopefully convey in Dopefoot, it's like Bigfoot has gone beyond being a cryptid. Bigfoot's a phenomenon.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and that's one of the things I wanted to ask you about is Dopefoot explores a lot of the why we want to believe in Bigfoot. I think that's become the bigger thing surrounding the Bigfoot lore is like why do we want to believe it more so than like let's find actual footage or actual footprints or evidence of Bigfoot. It's more of why
Yeah.
we want to. For
Well,
you,
it's almost like
why?
you can't help it.
Yeah,
It's
why do you think that is? Why do you think we want that? Whether it's Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster or
sure.
a Yeti or Frogman or any other kind of cryptid mythological creature, why do you think we want to believe?
Well, I think part of it is that we can't help but believe, and I think the people who are the people who believe the least are the ones who are the farthest removed from the forest. Because let's just talk about Bigfoot kind of specifically instead of all Sasquatch and creature and everything. Bigfoot is something human-ish that lives in the forest, and I talk about this in Dopefoot. I think that this has to do with the uncanny valley. The idea that there's some primal instinct in all of us that makes us fear things that are similar to human, but not quite. And I think it goes back a long, long way. I think, the hominids that became the Homo sapiens, which became the modern day humans, were forest dwellers. And there were times when these early Homo sapiens were in these early primordial forests with other forms of Homo species, the other cousins of man that all broke out. Neanderthals, obviously, being the most famous, because it was more than just Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. It was Homo sapiens and about 7 other species. So at one point, our forefathers and mothers were living in the forest or on the perimeter of the forest with memories of things that were similar but incompatible to them. And it's like human history is the history of violence. So you got to think that, like, from the very beginning, groups were at war with one another and there was tribalism. So I think what happens is that we go into the woods and we're triggered because we're on guard to be on the lookout for something similar to us, but potentially bigger and more powerful than us. And it's kind of like we can't help it. You take a staunch disbeliever, a staunch skeptic, and you drop them off in the woods of Northern California and say, okay, you're going to live here in a tent for 5 days. They might not believe in Bigfoot, but I guarantee they're going to be scared. Something will get under their skin and they will be frightened.
Yeah, that's amazing. Hearing you talk about Bigfoot reminds me of how I grew up with like the Loch Ness monster being something of an obsession of mine. Like,
Oh,
I've
yeah?
always been into aquatic horror, and like the idea that there's something beneath the water that we can't see always terrified me.
Terrifying to me, too. I mean,
Yeah,
totally one of my deepest fears is aquatic horror and what
right.
lies below the surface.
And I think like you, I mean, I did so much research on the Loch Ness monster over the years that eventually like the logical endpoint is like this probably doesn't exist. But there's still a little piece of me that's like I still want to believe just a little bit
I
though,
would
right?
love to be
Like
proven wrong.
yeah,
That's what I
exactly.
always say too. I would love to be proven wrong. And it's crazy because the timing is almost cosmic too. I don't know if you guys have been watching the news, but Bigfoot has been in the news. You guys hear?
Yeah.
Did you guys hear the recent Bigfoot news?
I did not hear the
Ah,
recent
Okay,
Bigfoot news,
there
no.
are two big stories that just came out last week. One, there's been a real uptick in Bigfoot sightings in Ohio. There was like a string
Okay.
of 7 Bigfoot sightings from supposedly credible witnesses. And so you got people in the Bigfoot forums talking about how, oh, they were following a food source, or they were escaping bad weather, and it makes total sense. So that's been pretty big. The other really big news is that there was a documentary played at South by Southwest where a documentarian purports to have proof that the Patterson Gimlin film is a hoax. He says that he unearthed footage that hasn't been seen in 50, 60 years that shows that the version we've all seen, the one that, is iconic, that was actually the second take, that they did a dress rehearsal beforehand. So
Oh my
it's
God.
like a complete, tear down of one of the pillars of Bigfoot belief. So it's crazy. Obviously, the hardcore believers have not been convinced. I personally haven't seen the video yet, the purported footage, but of course you got people now saying that the proof of the hoax is the hoax. That
yeah.
this new footage is probably just AI generated because this guy wants to have the honor of, like, slashing down Bigfoot belief and destroying the myth. So who knows? But it's really a fun time to be talking about Bigfoot.
Yeah, that's awesome. I had no idea. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
And that brings so what you said earlier about us, your answer to us wanting to believe, and how if you throw people in the woods, they're more likely to be scared than someone that probably does believe in Bigfoot. I think the same goes for like ghosts or anything else, where you take a
Absolutely.
skeptic and you bring them into a quote unquote haunted location, they're going to be probably more scared than a believer is.
Exactly. I don't believe in ghosts, but I do not want to spend the night in a abandoned mental asylum.
Yeah.
I would be very, very scared, and every noise I heard and everything in my peripheral vision would be sending me off the deep end. But yeah, it's that's part of being human. So it's like one of the things I wanted to convey in Dopefoot is that belief in Bigfoot is a human reaction. No one's being duped. No one's being tricked. It has nothing to do with whether or not the Patterson Gimlin film is real or not. It has to do with the fact that we are on edge when we were in the forest, and that won't go away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you paint, and I don't want to spoil anything for people out there who have not read it, but you paint Bigfoot as this like overarching thing that always could end up being in the forest. Well, there are these actual physical dangers that are always present physically
Right.
to the characters in it. And it's such a great way to present Bigfoot in the mythology of like, he's this overarching threat that may or may not even be there, but here's
Mm-hmm.
all these real things that are happening. It's such a great construct of using that Bigfoot lore.
Thank you. Yeah, Bigfoot's the thread, but
Yeah.
for the majority of the story, he's really kind of like a secondary concern. The
Yeah.
characters are dealing with much more pressing issues than whether or not there's a Bigfoot in the perimeter, in the tree line watching over them. There are things that require much more immediate attention. So it kind of like it's the way that he's always kind of Bigfoot. The phenomenon is always kind of like in the background, but yeah, I knew that people would want like some sort of like money shot, and that was another one of the things I really wrestled with. Was I wanted to make a book that was going to be satisfying to people who believe in Bigfoot and people who don't believe in Bigfoot. I wanted your belief in Bigfoot to kind of be secondary. I wanted to give you the best Bigfoot book you've ever read, no matter what side of the fence you're on. So it was fun, and I thought a lot about it. And like I said, I think believing in Bigfoot is just such a human reaction. Because it's not just California, is it? You got Bigfoot all over the country, and in other countries, there's the wild man, the hairy man of the jungle or the forest. So it's really universal. And something else I thought about recently, too, it's like Bigfoot is like an international free IP that like
Yeah.
anyone can grab onto. Bigfoot is so well known, but you don't have to, own or pay copyright to use the idea of Bigfoot and the cryptid and the wild man in the woods. So it was really fun to get in that world and stay in that world and give it my spin.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So when you're writing this book, it like you said, there are these Bigfoot's kind of a secondary threat to what's really going on in this setting. But you take some twists and turns. You have some characters that end up by the end of this book not where I expected them to end up at all. How do you utilize like plot outlines, or are you someone who very much just goes and writes and sees where it takes you? I'm curious.
Sure, sure. I think I usually outline about like the first two thirds, and I'm really
Okay.
deliberate about how I go. And then by the time I can really imagine the ending and the connective tissue that's going to bring it all together, that's when I really kind of just run for it. But I will say, in terms of, plotting or planning, I love stories where you almost wish the horror isn't going to happen. There's like, I think Friday 13th Part 4, or there are a couple other, the raft episode of Creep Show. You get these really interesting groups, and they're having this really fun experience, and it's like you almost wish Jason or the monster it just won't show up at all, and that you can just like hang out here where it's like fun and you're feeling cool. And I wanted to kind of like upend that, and I think I do it twice. I think in the beginning, one of the first beta readers I had, he was like, oh, Dopefoot isn't that long. You should pad it out a little bit and have more of the main character's time on the farm. And it was like, no, because that's what you wanted, right? You
Yeah.
wanted this character to have found this like cool little safe community on a farm, and it was going to be a dream come true. So no, you cannot have more time with Harmless on the farm. And then there's the big point. I think people will once we start talking about spoilers and stuff, but like I think people will come to understand that there is a moment in Dopefoot where it's a complete a friend of mine read it, and it was Bitter Corella, and they said they hated me for a second at that moment. The moment when everything goes out the window and you realize like, oh, so it's not this story about like a group of friends on an adventure against all odds. This is messed up.
Yeah.
And so I know that that's gonna like people are gonna be like upset when they find out that it's not the story they wanted, and I know that that's a little bit risky, but I'm just hoping that by the you've got to stick with it at that point, right? You're
Yeah.
too deep to just like be like, oh, what, but I mean, it's not like a complete genre shift, but it is like I throw out a lot of the archetypes, and I definitely defy expectations.
Yeah. Like the way you just described that is perfect because it is. It's like you get introduced to these characters in this farm and I'm immediately endeared to all of them. Like every single one of them, I'm like, "Oh, this is great. Like I love these characters." And then you immediately throw a wrench in everything. And then even like you said later down the line, you throw that second wrench and it's like, "What the fuck?"
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
there's a moment. There's definitely a WTF moment, and I love it. I love it.
yeah. Oh, yeah, and it's great because like you're not giving like in your words you're not giving the reader like what they want, but what you're giving them is something that's like vastly more fascinating in my opinion. Like I
Thank
think
you.
it's just yeah, it's insane where this book goes. I love
Well,
that.
once you do something like that, where you like, okay, I'm gonna pull the rug out from you, it kind of gives you permission to just go hog wild after that. Because after that moment, people are gonna be like, what can you even do after
Yeah.
this? And that's where I really kind of like to. I mean, you've got like a countdown to annihilation. Literally, there's like a countdown to midnight. The doomsday clock is running down, and you've got this guy who doesn't know what he is, and he's getting surrounded on all sides by things he doesn't quite understand and that don't quite fit. I just had a blast with it, and I love we can do little teasers. I love the character Ranger Mason who like
Hmm.
pops up and like it just like is and isn't who you think he is, and it was just so fun making up this character that presents just like a normal park ranger, but encapsulates so much more about sort of like national park dystopian fears, if
Yeah.
that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the character Ranger Mason who pops up in Act 3 a few times.
He's
He's so
probably
much
the
fun.
most bone chilling. Yeah.
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 Right, it's like,
My
are you afraid of Bigfoot, or maybe you're afraid of this guy with a goofy grin and a ranger's hat? Who do you want to take your chances against? You're really not sure in that moment.
Yeah, it's that man or bear debate that everybody has
Mm-hmm.
online, right?
Exactly, right.
my favorite character though, I just want to touch on her for a second, is Honeydew. Is my
Oh
favorite
my
character.
god.
Can you
She
just
Yes.
is
talk
an
about like
iceberg.
yeah, can you talk about just kind of setting up that character for the audience, and where did that character specifically come from? Because our main character, Harmless, is really the audience. He's the audience surrogate.
Right.
He's the one presented for the first time here. But the one I really latched onto was Honeydew. I love her character. So how did her story come about?
Yeah, well, I did have some beta readers, and I was lucky to have some really talented people reading it who aren't normally beta readers. Mark Miller, producer of Nightbreed, the guy who wrote Hellraiser: The Toll, worked with Clive Barker closely. He read an early version, and he felt like Honeydew wasn't fleshed out enough. He's the one who said Honeydew's an iceberg, so yeah, when I first wrote her, she kind of hinted that she was from the forest and of the forest, and I think there was a little more like hinting of why she was so afraid to be off of the farm. She doesn't want to be stuck in the forest when the sun goes down. There's something specific about her psychology, and it's like she also has a strange mannerism. She claps her hands before she says anything, and it's kind of like, what is that even all about? So Mark Miller read it, and he was like, you've got to do more Honeydew. There needs to be more Honeydew in this. So that's where I really kind of expanded her mythology. I was like, okay, what really happened to Honeydew? And it had to be this situation that connected her to the forest, and made her explained why it was like taboo for her to be outside, out in the woods after sunset, and just what kind of person would what would a person have to endure to kind of like come to believe this and to still like hold within them this intense fear so much so that they have to like break themselves out just to like even speak. So I really did have a lot of fun, and I mean, I kind of like hate what I put Honeydew through. There was the scene in the end where Harmless does see her again. Slight spoilers, but there was the scene where they cross paths at the end, but they don't speak to each other for obvious reasons. Blah blah blah. Spoilers. But there is, as you know, I'm sure you both noticed, there is a single chapter that goes off of Harmless's shoulder and pops on someone else's shoulder, and that's Honeydew. Honeydew has her own chapter. The whole thing's been from Harmless's perspective, but there's this one moment where we bust it out, and I wanted to make it so significant that, I don't know if you noticed, it doesn't even have a chapter number. It goes from like chapter 26, Honeydew's chapter 27, because that actually didn't exist in the first draft of Dopefoot. But Mark Miller read it. He said, Honeydew is an iceberg. And I said, you're right. And so I went down a little more on that iceberg, and it's like, how far can you go? And then another thing Mark Miller said to me, he was like, don't write this like you want to make it an IP. Write this like you want to make it a religion. And I was like, whoa. So that gave me permission to just go straight up like Lovecraftian. It's like, Honeydew is not just not the person you thought. She is just something else entirely.
Oh, I love that. Don't write it like it's a write it like it's a religion. That's such baller advice. What the
I know,
hell?
right? Yeah.
That's so great. So we've talked at length about Bigfoot, about cryptids, that kind of thing. How they're like the worldwide, public domain IP.
Right.
What like So we love a double feature on this podcast. Casey, are we good to hit him with the double feature question?
Let's hit the double feature question.
Okay.
I was thinking about this one, and I don't know if I have an answer.
I know. I'm curious. So, cryptid movies.
Mhm.
Are there two cryptid movies that you would pair together for like an ultimate creature feature double feature?
That is a great question. I think there are a couple that really scratch the itch entirely well. And what I like about both of these is they didn't quite break out in the ways they could have. Both came out in the 20 teens. The first might be more obvious than the second one. Exists. It's a found footage Bigfoot horror movie. It's produced or directed by one of the archetypes of the Blair Witch Project, so
Yeah.
they have the woods chops, and that's a really great one. It does play within the fence line, though. It's they're being stalked by something. You find out the motivation for this thing being stalked, and there's an incredible money shot at the end where there's a catharsis, and there's no question. You're given your answer about whether or not Bigfoot exists, and I just think it does everything right. I mean, if you're going to go that angle where you're going to be like Bigfoot is real, this one did it in a way that it hit all the boxes the best, A second one I would match to it isn't quite a cryptid, but it's so good, and it has that same sort of like isolated in a cabin sort of feel. That's Extraterrestrial. And I forget who directed that. And it's not found footage, but it's in a found footage style. I don't remember the actors. I can see you might be looking it up, Sam. Michael Ironside has a cameo in it where he plays this conspiracy theory cannabis farmer. And I actually based a character in Teleportasm. Uncle Sal is like based on Michael Ironside in this film Extraterrestrial. But it's just really good in terms of the way it reveals the flying saucer and the way it reveals the actual extraterrestrials. It has a great twist at the end. Another really fantastic one. If I was going to do a cryptid double feature, I would, it would be like a heaven and earth sort of thing, Bigfoot and, in exists and aliens and extraterrestrial.
I love that. That's awesome. I've actually not seen either of these, so I put them on the watch list.
Check them out and
That
let me know what
rules.
you think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, same here. I have not caught either one. They've been on the watch list for a while, and you know, hearing all this Bigfoot talk, it's making me itchy to watch some more cryptid
I
stuff.
know,
So,
right?
Yeah.
well, Joshua, thank you so much again for bringing Dopefoot to the basement. We appreciate you. Anytime you have something and want to come chat, we are more than game, because we love your work, and always excited to see what you have coming out. But for people listening, where can they find the book? Where can they find you online?
Yeah, you can pre-order the book, Maddox Media. I think they're really easy to find, and you can probably even pre-order it on the Amazons and the Barnes and Nobles by now, I think. It comes out June 16th, and I'm really excited about it. People should just keep up with me on Instagram, at Joshua_Millican. I've actually been releasing little, like, character overview videos and little behind the scenes inspirations for Dopefoot, so that'll let you know, the countdown is on, and I am doing some convention appearances, and hoping to really have a fantastic launch for Dopefoot in June, and hope to kind of bring it on some sort of tour and really like bring Dopefoot to the people.
Thanks for letting us be some of the first people you bring it to. We love this book, and we love your work.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal: providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.